You were never weak until you were taught to apologize for existing. Not for mistakes, but for opinions. Not for harm, but for honesty. Somewhere along the way, sorry stopped being a word of responsibility and became a habit of submission. People don't realize this early, but the moment you say sorry when you are not wrong, you silently tell the world one thing: I am less important than your comfort. This is not about being rude. This is not about having ego. This is about power, respect, and control, and how the wrong apology slowly destroys all three. Asterisk. There was a time when the word sorry carried weight. It was not casual, not automatic, and definitely not weak. Saying sorry meant something serious had happened. It meant responsibility, awareness, and a clear understanding the harm was done. People did not throw the word around to fill silence or soften their presence. They used it when they crossed a real line. That original meaning mattered because it protected the value of the word. When something has value, it is used carefully. When it is overused, it becomes noise. That is exactly what has happened to sorry in modern behavior. Today, sorry is no longer a response to wrongdoing. It has become a reflex. People say it before they even know whether they are wrong. They say it to avoid discomfort, to escape tension, to keep others calm. Instead of being a sign of accountability, it has turned into a shield against confrontation. This shift did not happen overnight. It slowly developed as people were rewarded for being agreeable rather than honest. Over time, apologizing became a way to signal compliance instead of responsibility, and that subtle change completely altered its meaning. The problem begins when people are taught, directly or indirectly, that their presence needs justification. From a young age, many learn that being quiet, accommodating, and apologetic earns approval. They learn that speaking firmly brings resistance, but saying sorry brings relief. This creates a pattern where the word sorry is used not because something wrong occurred, but because the person fears negative reactions. The apology comes before any judgment, almost as if the speaker is pre-punishing themselves to avoid being punished by others. This is where the word starts losing its integrity. When someone says sorry for asking a question, they are not correcting a mistake. They are minimizing themselves. When someone says sorry for taking time, space, or expressing a thought, they are sending a message that their needs are less important than other people's comfort. Over time, this behavior becomes invisible to the person doing it. They no longer question why they are apologizing. It feels normal. But what feels normal is often what has been repeated the most, not what is healthy or correct. As apologies become more frequent, their impact weakens. The word stops signaling regret and starts signaling insecurity. People around you subconsciously register this. Even if they do not say it out loud, they sense that you are unsure of your position. Humans are extremely sensitive to behavioral patterns. They read tone, posture, timing, and repetition. When someone apologizes too often, it tells others that this person is uncomfortable taking up space. Once that message is received, the dynamic begins to shift. The loss of meaning also happens because sorry is often used to replace clarity. Instead of stating boundaries, people apologize. Instead of explaining decisions, people apologize. Instead of standing firm, people soften themselves with sorry. This creates confusion because apologies are meant to close issues, not open them. When you apologize where no harm exists, you blur the line between accountability and self-erasure. Others may not even know what you were apologizing for, but they will still register the submissive tone that comes with it. Another reason sorry lost its meaning is emotional laziness. Saying sorry is easier than having an honest conversation. It ends tension quickly, even if it solves nothing. People choose short-term comfort over long-term respect. They apologize to end the moment, not to correct behavior. Over time, this trains the mind to use apologies as emotional shortcuts. Instead of addressing issues directly, the word sorry becomes a tool to avoid responsibility for communication. Ironically, this avoidance makes real responsibility harder when it actually matters. There is also social pressure involved. Modern environments often reward those who are non-confrontational. In workplaces, families, and social circles, people who do not challenge others are labeled as easy or nice. The word sorry becomes a badge of that identity. But being easy to deal with is not the same as being respected. When apologies are used to maintain harmony at the cost of self-respect, the harmony is fake. It exists only as long as one person keeps shrinking themselves. As sorry becomes more common, it also becomes less sincere. When a word is used too often, people stop listening to it. Think about how many times you have heard someone say sorry without any change in behavior afterward. This repetition trains the brain to ignore the word. It no longer signals reflection or growth. It becomes background noise. This is dangerous because when a real apology is needed, it may no longer carry the seriousness it should. The loss of meaning is also internal. Every unnecessary apology reinforces a belief inside the person apologizing. That belief is simple but destructive. I am a problem. Even if the person would never say this out loud, the behavior teaches the mind that existence requires permission. Over time, this belief shapes personality. The person becomes hesitant, overly cautious, and emotionally guarded. They start anticipating conflict before it happens and apologizing in advance for imagined mistakes. This anticipation keeps them in a constant state of tension. Once the word sorry becomes detached from real wrongdoing, it starts functioning as a self-soothing mechanism. People say it to reduce their own anxiety, not to repair damage. This is an important distinction. A real apology is outward focused. It acknowledges harm done to another person. A habitual apology is inward focused. It tries to calm the speaker's fear of rejection. When apologies are driven by fear, they are no longer ethical or meaningful. They are survival responses. Another layer of this problem is that people confuse politeness with apology. Politeness does not require self-blame. You can be respectful without taking responsibility for things that are not your fault. But many people were never taught this distinction. They learned that being polite means apologizing, even when nothing wrong occurred. This confusion further erodes the value of the word. Instead of being a moral act, sorry becomes a social filler. As this pattern continues, the person's sense of authority weakens. Authority does not come from dominance. It comes from certainty. When someone apologizes unnecessarily, they signal uncertainty about their right to speak, act, or decide. This uncertainty affects how others respond. People are more likely to question, interrupt, or override someone who constantly apologizes, because the apology suggests that the person themselves is not fully convinced of their position. The tragedy is that most people who over-apologize believe they are being kind. They believe they are maintaining peace, being mature, or showing empathy. But kindness that requires self-disrespect is not kindness. It is fear wearing a polite mask. True empathy does not demand that you erase yourself. It allows space for both accountability and self. When sorry loses its meaning, empathy becomes distorted. and relationships become unbalanced. The word sorry was never meant to be a default setting. It was meant to be a deliberate act. When used correctly, it strengthens character. When used incorrectly, it weakens identity. This is why understanding how sorry lost its meaning is critical. Without this awareness, people continue the habit without realizing the cost. They think they are being safe, but they are slowly training themselves to be small. By the end of this process, sorry no longer reflects regret. It reflects conditioning. It reflects a learned behavior where the individual prioritizes external comfort over internal truth. Once a word reaches this stage, it cannot perform its original function. It cannot restore trust because it no longer signals sincerity. It cannot resolve conflict because it avoids clarity. It becomes a symbol of submission rather than responsibility. This is where the shift must begin. Before someone can stop over-apologizing, they must understand that the word itself has been misused. They must recognize that not every uncomfortable moment requires an apology, and not every reaction from others is their responsibility. Reclaiming the meaning of sorry starts with using it less, not more. It starts with silence instead of reflex. It starts with asking a simple question before speaking. Did I actually do something wrong? Until that question becomes a habit, the word sorry will continue to lose value. And as long as it loses value, the person using it will lose power without even realizing it. This is not about becoming harsh or insensitive. It is about restoring balance. Apologies should repair damage, not create weakness. When sorry is returned to its rightful place, it regains strength, and so does the person who uses it. But when it is not returned to that place, something else happens quietly and steadily. Control begins to shift away from the person who apologizes and into the hands of those around them. This shift is rarely obvious. It does not arrive as open domination or clear abuse. Instead, it shows itself through small changes in behavior, subtle power imbalances, and unspoken expectations that grow stronger over time. Control does not start with others deciding to dominate you. It starts with them realizing that you will move first. People who apologize too much often believe they are keeping situations calm. But what they are really doing is removing friction. Friction is not always bad. Healthy friction establishes boundaries. When friction disappears, others are free to push further without resistance. Over time, this creates a pattern where one person adjusts constantly while others remain unchanged. The moment someone apologizes unnecessarily, they send a signal. That signal is not heard as words. It is felt as permission. Permission to interrupt. Permission to demand explanations. Permission to shift blame. Humans respond instinctively to these signals. Even kind people, without intending harm, will lean into positions of comfort and advantage when they sense no resistance. This is not cruelty. It is nature. Where there is no boundary, space gets taken. At first, the control is mild. People might speak over you or dismiss your opinions slightly. You may notice that your preferences are treated as optional, while others' preferences are treated as fixed. Because these moments are small, they are easy to ignore. You tell yourself it is not worth making an issue out of it. You apologize again to smooth things over. This response reinforces the pattern. Each apology confirms that you will absorb discomfort rather than challenge it. As this cycle continues, control becomes normalized. Others begin to expect your compliance. They do not ask. They assume. When you finally hesitate or resist, the reaction often surprises you. People may act confused, irritated, or even offended. This reaction reveals something important. Your earlier apologies were never neutral. They shaped expectations. You trained people to see you as the one who bends. When you stop bending, it feels like a disruption to them, even though it is simply balance being restored. Over-apologizing also weakens your negotiating position. Whether in personal relationships, academic settings, or professional environments, influence depends on perceived certainty. Apologies spoken without cause introduce doubt about your confidence and authority. When others sense doubt, they feel safer challenging you. They may question your decisions, reframe events to their advantage, or subtly shift responsibility onto you. Not because you deserve it, but because your behavior suggests you will accept it. Another way control develops is through emotional management. People who apologize too much often take responsibility for how others feel. If someone is uncomfortable, upset, or tense, they assume it is their fault. This belief leads them to apologize for emotions they did not cause. Over time, this dynamic gives others emotional leverage. They do not need to communicate clearly. Your reflexive apology does the work for them. You become the emotional caretaker, constantly adjusting your behavior to stabilize others. Even when those emotions come from unreasonable expectations, this dynamic is especially dangerous because it is self-reinforcing. The more you apologize, the more responsible you feel. The more responsible you feel, the more you apologize. Eventually, you are no longer reacting to real situations. You are reacting to anticipated reactions. You start predicting what might upset others and apologizing in advance. At this stage, control no longer needs to be applied externally. You control yourself on behalf of others. People who benefit from this dynamic may not consciously exploit it, but they will still benefit from it. They receive more patience, more flexibility, more understanding, while giving less in return. The relationship becomes uneven. One side carries the emotional and psychological load, while the other enjoys comfort and stability. This imbalance often goes unnoticed until resentment builds. By then, the habit of apologizing is so ingrained that expressing frustration feels unnatural or even wrong. Control also deepens through language patterns. Apologies often come paired with softening phrases. I might be wrong. It's probably my fault. I don't want to cause trouble. While these phrases sound polite, they weaken statements before they are even heard. Others learn that your words arrive already diluted. This makes it easier for them to dismiss, reinterpret, or override what you say. Over time, your voice carries less weight, not because it lacks value, but because it is framed as uncertain. As your influence decreases, decision-making power shifts. Group decisions may move forward without your input. Your preferences may be acknowledged but not acted upon. You might be consulted after decisions are already made, rather than during the process. These are signs of control taking root. They are not dramatic, but they are consistent. Each moment reinforces the idea that you are adaptable, while others are fixed. Another consequence of over-apologizing is blame absorption. When conflicts arise, people who apologize quickly often become default targets for responsibility. Even when events are complex or shared, their willingness to say sorry makes it easier for others to step back. Responsibility quietly accumulates on one side. Over time, this creates a distorted narrative where one person appears to be the source of most problems, simply because they are the only one acknowledging fault. This distortion affects self-perception as well. If you are always the one apologizing, you may start believing that you are genuinely at fault more often than you are. This belief erodes self. When self-trust weakens, reliance on external validation increases. You look to others to confirm whether your reactions are appropriate, your boundaries reasonable, your feelings justified. This dependency further strengthens control, because authority shifts outward. Control through over-apologizing is rarely enforced with force. It is maintained through comfort. Others become comfortable with the dynamic, and comfort resists change. When you attempt to stop apologizing unnecessarily, people may interpret it as coldness, arrogance, or aggression. This reaction can trigger guilt, pushing you back into old habits. Recognizing this pattern is essential, because the discomfort you feel when changing is not evidence that you are wrong. It is evidence that the dynamic is shifting. Importantly, not everyone who benefits from your apologies is malicious. Many simply accept the roles that develop naturally. However, intent does not change impact. Even unintentional control limits your growth and expression. It narrows your options and shapes your behavior around others' expectations. Over time, this limitation becomes internalized. You stop considering certain actions or statements, not because they are wrong, but because they might disrupt the balance you have been maintaining. The longer this pattern continues, the harder it becomes to break. Apologies turn into habits, habits into identity traits. You may start describing yourself as too nice or non-confrontational, without realizing that these traits developed as coping mechanisms. They were not chosen freely. They were learned responses to environments where asserting yourself felt unsafe or costly. Understanding this helps remove self-blame. The issue is not weakness of character, but misdirected adaptation. Breaking free from this control does not mean becoming harsh or uncooperative. It means recalibrating responsibility. You stop carrying what is not yours. You pause before apologizing and assess whether harm actually occurred. You allow others to experience discomfort without immediately trying to fix it. This pause interrupts the automatic transfer of control. It creates space for equality. As you reduce unnecessary apologies, you may notice resistance. Some people will push harder, testing whether the old dynamic still exists. This is a critical moment. If you return to apologizing to restore comfort, control reasserts itself. If you remain calm and consistent, a new balance can form. Respect often follows boundaries, even if it arrives after discomfort. Ultimately, people who apologize too much are not controlled because they lack intelligence or strength. They are controlled because they prioritize harmony over self-respect, and harmony without balance invites dominance. Restoring balance requires awareness, patience, and the willingness to tolerate temporary tension. It requires understanding that respect is not maintained by constant agreement, but by clear presence. When apologies are used intentionally rather than reflexively, control loses its grip. Others learn to meet you where you stand instead of leaning on you to move. Communication becomes clearer, responsibility more evenly shared. This shift is not loud, but it is profound. It changes how you are treated, and more importantly, how you treat yourself. This understanding prepares the ground for the next step, examining the internal cost of over-apologizing and how deeply it reshapes identity, confidence, and self-perception. This understanding prepares the ground for the next step, examining the internal cost of over-apologizing and how deeply it reshapes identity, confidence, and self-perception. The most serious damage caused by constant apologies does not happen in conversations or relationships. It happens quietly inside the person who apologizes. External control is only possible because an internal shift has already taken place. By the time others begin to influence you, your own mind has already started working against you. Every unnecessary apology leaves a psychological trace. It may feel small in the moment, but repetition turns small acts into beliefs. Each time you say sorry without reason, your mind records the behavior and looks for justification. The brain always tries to make sense of actions. If you apologize, the mind assumes you must have done something wrong. When this happens repeatedly, the conclusion becomes automatic. I am usually at fault. This belief does not arrive suddenly. It builds slowly, apology by apology, until it feels like common sense. As this belief strengthens, self-trust begins to weaken. You start second-guessing your reactions. When something feels unfair, you hesitate before acknowledging it. When you feel discomfort, you question whether you are being too sensitive. Instead of trusting your internal signals, you look outward for confirmation. This shift is critical because self-trust is the foundation of confidence. Without it, confidence becomes fragile and conditional. Over time, your internal dialogue changes. It becomes cautious, self-correcting, and overly polite. Before speaking, you mentally rehearse how your words might be received. You adjust tone, wording, and even posture to reduce the risk of conflict. This constant monitoring consumes mental energy. It creates a state of low-level anxiety that never fully disappears because you are always preparing to apologize, even before anything goes wrong. This internal tension affects how you experience the world. Situations that should feel neutral start feeling risky. Simple interactions carry emotional weight because they require careful navigation. You are no longer fully present in conversations. Part of your attention is always scanning for signs of disapproval. This divided attention reduces clarity. You miss cues, misinterpret reactions, and then apologize again to compensate, deepening the cycle. Constant apologizing also alters identity. Identity is shaped by repeated behavior. When apologizing becomes frequent, it becomes part of how you see yourself. You may start identifying as someone who is bad at communication, too much, or always messing things up. These labels feel accurate because they are reinforced by your own words. Each apology becomes evidence supporting the identity, even if the original situation did not justify it. This identity shift affects ambition and self-expression. People who over-apologize often downplay achievements. They soften success with disclaimers. They hesitate to take credit. Internally, this creates a conflict. You want to grow, but growth requires visibility, and visibility feels unsafe. The mind associates being noticed with potential criticism, which triggers the urge to apologize. As a result, you may unconsciously limit your goals to avoid standing out. Another internal consequence is emotional suppression. When you apologize too quickly, you skip the step of understanding your own feelings. Instead of asking why you feel upset or uncomfortable, you assume the feeling itself is the problem. You apologize to make the feeling disappear rather than exploring its source. Over time, this teaches you to distrust your emotions. They become something to manage rather than information to learn from. This suppression leads to emotional confusion. You may feel irritated or drained without knowing why. Because emotions were never processed, they accumulate. The body carries this accumulation as tension, fatigue, or restlessness. The mind carries it as self-criticism. You might feel frustrated with yourself for feeling overwhelmed, which leads to more apologies, this time directed inward. The internal apology becomes self-blame. Self-blame is one of the most damaging outcomes of constant apologizing. When you blame yourself by default, you assume responsibility for outcomes beyond your control. If someone is upset, you assume you caused it. If a situation becomes awkward, you assume you handled it poorly. This assumption prevents learning because it skips analysis. Instead of examining what actually happened, you accept fault and move on, carrying the weight with you. This pattern also affects how you interpret feedback. Constructive criticism may feel heavier than it is because it confirms your internal belief of fault. Neutral feedback may be misread as disapproval. Praise may feel uncomfortable because it conflicts with your self-image. You might dismiss compliments or apologize for them, reinforcing the belief that you are not deserving. Over time, this creates a distorted self-image that does not align with reality. The internal damage extends to confidence in decisions depends on believing in your judgment. When you frequently apologize, you undermine that belief. You hesitate longer, seek more opinions, and delay action. When decisions are made, you may apologize for them in advance, signaling doubt. This doubt feeds back into your mind, making future decisions even harder. The result is paralysis disguised as politeness. Constant apologies also shape your relationship with mistakes. Instead of seeing mistakes as information, you see them as personal failures. This perspective increases fear of error. Fear narrows thinking and reduces creativity. You choose safer options, avoid experimentation, and stay within familiar boundaries. Internally, this feels like stability, but it is actually stagnation. Growth requires risk, and risk feels incompatible with a mindset that apologizes for missteps before they occur. Another subtle internal effect is loss of presence. Presence comes from being grounded in your own perspective. When you apologize excessively, your attention is directed outward. You become more focused on how others perceive you than on what you perceive. This outward focus disconnects you from your instincts. You may ignore gut feelings because they conflict with external expectations. Over time, intuition weakens from lack of use. This disconnection affects self-respect grows when actions align with values. When you apologize for things that do not violate your values, you create internal inconsistency. You say one thing with your words and another with your beliefs. The mind senses this mismatch and experiences discomfort. To reduce the discomfort, you may adjust your beliefs downward rather than adjusting behavior upward. This adjustment lowers self-respect gradually and quietly. As self-respect declines, boundaries become harder to maintain. Internally, you may know what you want or need, but expressing it feels risky. You imagine the reaction and preemptively soften your stance with apologies. Each time you do this, the boundary weakens. Eventually, you may stop noticing when boundaries are crossed because crossing has become normal. This normalization deepens the internal sense of powerlessness. The internal damage of constant apologies is cumulative. No single apology causes it, but the pattern does. Over months or years, the effects compound. Confidence erodes, self-trust diminishes, identity narrows, and emotional clarity fades. The person may appear calm and agreeable on the outside, while internally feeling tense, uncertain, and dissatisfied. This gap between appearance and experience is exhausting. Recognizing this damage is not about blaming yourself. These patterns often develop in response to environments where asserting oneself was discouraged or punished. Apologizing became a strategy for safety, but strategies that protect you in one context can limit you in another. Awareness allows you to update the strategy. What once kept you safe may now be holding you back. Healing the internal damage begins with observation. Not every apology needs to be eliminated, but every apology should be examined. When you feel the urge to say sorry, pause and ask what emotion is driving it. Is it responsibility, or is it fear? Is harm present, or is discomfort simply being avoided? This pause creates space between impulse and action. In that space, self-trust can begin to rebuild. As self-trust strengthens, confidence follows naturally. Confidence is not loud or forceful. It is quiet alignment between thought and action. When you stop apologizing for your existence, your internal dialogue becomes more supportive. You begin to speak to yourself with the same fairness you extend to others. This shift reduces anxiety and increases clarity. Understanding the internal damage of over-apologizing is essential because external change cannot last without internal change. If the internal belief of fault remains, behavior will eventually return to apology. By addressing the internal cost, you prepare yourself for lasting transformation. But transformation is not simply about reducing unnecessary apologies. It is about understanding when saying sorry is actually counterproductive. The majority of people do not consider this distinction. They assume that apologizing is always the polite or correct thing to do, yet in reality, saying sorry indiscriminately diminishes your presence, authority, and self-respect. Knowing when to withhold an apology is as critical as knowing when to issue one, because overuse has created a pattern of self-diminishment, internal anxiety, and external control. The first situation in which you should never apologize is for asserting boundaries. Boundaries are the invisible lines that define your comfort, values, and limits. They are essential to your emotional health and personal integrity. When you apologize for setting a boundary, you signal that your needs are negotiable or secondary. For example, if you refuse a request that violates your time or energy, saying sorry weakens your position. Boundaries are inherently protective and rational. They do not require justification. Apologizing for them communicates that your presence, time, and energy are optional, which invites others to challenge or disregard those boundaries. Every unnecessary apology in such moments reinforces the internal belief that your needs are less important than others, eroding self-respect and confidence. Another scenario where an apology is inappropriate is when someone is upset due to their own perception rather than your actions. Human emotions are complex and often do not directly correlate with external events. Someone may be angry, frustrated, or disappointed, yet their feelings are not necessarily caused by your behavior. Apologizing in these cases transfers responsibility for their emotions onto you, creating a dynamic of undue accountability. Constantly absorbing responsibility for others' feelings conditions your mind to expect blame, making you reactive instead of deliberate. Learning to distinguish between actual wrongdoing and another person's emotional response is key to breaking this cycle. You should also avoid apologizing for taking space or existing as yourself. Many people habitually apologize for being present, speaking up, or expressing opinions. This behavior stems from an internalized fear of conflict or disapproval. Each apology in these contexts communicates that your existence or viewpoint is a potential inconvenience. Reinforcing speaking, standing, or expressing thoughts are natural rights, not transgressions. Apologies here serve only to shrink your perceived importance and strengthen external control, teaching both yourself and others that your contributions are optional or secondary. Professional contexts are particularly prone to unnecessary apologies. Over-apologizing in work environments diminishes authority and credibility. For instance, apologizing for decisions you are qualified to make, for delegating tasks, or for expressing a well-reasoned opinion signals lack of confidence. Colleagues perceive hesitation as weakness, creating space for them to challenge your judgment, override decisions, or subtly manipulate outcomes. Over time, this habitual apology pattern corrodes professional reputation, reduces influence, and limits career growth. In contrast, measured communication that distinguishes between genuine error and legitimate action establishes authority without aggression. Social dynamics further illustrate when apologies are unnecessary. Within friendships, family relationships, or romantic partnerships, people often apologize to maintain temporary harmony, even when they are not at fault. While this may seem polite, habitual apologies create imbalance. The person apologizing becomes the default emotional caretaker, absorbing discomfort without acknowledgement or reciprocity. Over time, this fosters resentment and dependency. Relationships thrive on mutual respect, not on one-sided accommodation. Knowing when not to apologize preserves balance, encourages accountability for all parties, and allows genuine conflict resolution. An often overlooked instance where saying sorry is detrimental is during personal growth or self-improvement. Efforts to pursue goals, establish routines, or make lifestyle changes frequently provoke discomfort or resistance in others. Many people apologize preemptively for taking steps that prioritize their own growth, assuming they are inconveniencing those around them. This is counterproductive. Apologies in such situations teach your environment to expect compliance, discourage boundary recognition, and reduce personal initiative. True respect for yourself and your objectives requires eliminating preemptive apologies and embracing the discomfort that comes with asserting your path. The principle of deliberate speech underpins all of these situations. Every time you speak without reflexively apologizing, you signal confidence and clarity. This does not mean becoming insensitive or indifferent. It means differentiating between genuine mistakes, which warrant apology, and actions that are appropriate, necessary, or beneficial, which do not. Language is a tool of influence. Used incorrectly, it undermines. Used correctly, it reinforces presence and authority. By withholding unnecessary apologies, you communicate that your decisions, actions, and existence have inherent validity. Another critical aspect involves the timing and context of apology. Many people apologize immediately in anticipation of conflict, even before harm occurs. This preemptive apology is a form of self-subjugation. It assumes fault in the absence of evidence. Instead, observe and respond only when accountability is truly required. Premature apologies prevent learning because they erase the natural consequences of actions. When individuals are not forced to experience the outcomes of their behavior, neither they nor others develop clarity about responsibility. This erodes ethical reasoning and strengthens the pattern of internalized submission. Repetition of unnecessary apologies also conditions emotional responses. Each apology strengthens neural pathways associated with guilt, submission, and fear of disapproval. Over time, The reflex to apologize becomes automatic, triggered by minor perceived errors or imagined offenses. Breaking this neural pattern requires deliberate interruption of the reflex, conscious reassessment of each situation, and tolerance of temporary social discomfort. The temporary tension that arises when you choose not to apologize is necessary for recalibrating self-respect and asserting internal authority. In addition, excessive apologizing fosters dependency in others. People learn to rely on the habitual apologizer to maintain emotional equilibrium. When you finally stop apologizing unnecessarily, discomfort arises in others because the dynamic has changed. This reaction may feel like confrontation, criticism, or even conflict, but it is an opportunity for It teaches both parties that accountability is shared and that emotional and relational stability does not depend on one person diminishing themselves. Withholding unwarranted apologies shifts responsibility back to its rightful place, restoring equality in interpersonal dynamics. Another dimension to consider is internal emotional regulation. Over-apologizing teaches the mind that discomfort should be resolved externally rather than internally. When you refrain from apologizing unnecessarily, you begin practicing internal emotional management. You learn to tolerate tension, reflect on feelings, and make reasoned decisions about communication. This practice strengthens resilience, self-confidence, and mental clarity. The internal shift reinforces the external presence, making interactions less reactive and more grounded. It is equally important to recognize that withholding apologies does not equal aggression or indifference. Strategic non-apology requires discernment, empathy, and awareness. You communicate effectively by acknowledging when harm genuinely occurs, while maintaining clarity in situations where fault is absent. This nuanced approach fosters respect, trust, and authenticity. Others learn that your apologies are meaningful, reserved for genuine responsibility rather than habitual noise, enhancing the credibility and weight of your words. Ultimately, knowing when not to apologize is a reclaiming of personal power. Each unwarranted apology avoided reinforces internal authority, strengthens confidence, and diminishes external control. It transforms interactions from reactive compliance to deliberate participation. By consciously differentiating between actions that require accountability and actions that are rightful, necessary, or neutral, you recalibrate the balance between self-respect and social harmony. Over time, the habit of over-apologizing is replaced with intentional, strategic communication, restoring the integrity of both your words and your presence. This process also prepares the mind for future challenges. When you consistently withhold unnecessary apologies, you develop an internal framework for decision-making that prioritizes self-respect, clarity, and boundaries. Situations that once provoked anxiety now become manageable. Through observation and reasoned response, rather than reflexive submission, you no longer surrender authority in anticipation of disapproval. Instead, you maintain control over your actions, words, and reactions. This internal recalibration is the foundation for external influence and genuine confidence. Once you have trained yourself to recognize when not to apologize, the final stage of mastery emerges. Understanding the true power of a rare, meaningful apology. Unlike habitual or reflexive apologies, a meaningful apology carries weight, communicates accountability, and restores trust. Its strength comes not from frequency, but from intention, clarity, and emotional presence. In a world saturated with empty apologies, a thoughtful apology distinguishes you, signaling integrity and responsibility. The first element of a powerful apology is genuine recognition of harm. You must assess whether your actions truly caused negative consequences. Many people confuse discomfort or conflict with wrongdoing, apologizing reflexively for situations beyond their control. A rare, meaningful apology requires careful discernment. It addresses actual impact, not imagined offense. This distinction separates authentic accountability from automatic submission, ensuring your words convey sincerity rather than insecurity. Timing is equally critical. A deliberate apology is given after reflection, not impulsively at the first sign of tension. This demonstrates control and shows that you are not yielding to pressure, but responding with awareness. Premature apologies often signal weakness or left out, whereas a well-timed apology communicates intentionality and maturity. Paired with clarity, identifying the specific action, word, or decision that caused harm, it becomes a tool for genuine repair. Ambiguous statements such as, "I'm sorry if I upset you," dilute accountability. Precise phrasing, like "I apologize for interrupting you during the meeting," communicates reflection and responsibility. Consistency between words and actions reinforces the apology's credibility. Without behavioral adjustment, words alone lose meaning. A true apology is always accompanied by effort to prevent repetition of harm. This alignment demonstrates integrity and strengthens trust in both personal and professional relationships. Emotional presence is also vital. The apology must convey empathy, attentiveness, and recognition of the other person's experience. Tone, posture, and focus all contribute to communicating authenticity. The impact of rare, meaningful apologies extends beyond the moment. In relationships, they signal maturity, reinforce trust, and foster reciprocity. People notice when someone admits mistakes without diminishing themselves unnecessarily. Over-apologizing erodes authority and invites dependency. Sparing, intentional apologies foster equality, mutual accountability, and respect. In professional contexts, leaders who apologize judiciously demonstrate credibility and ethical strength. One well-placed apology can resolve conflict, model integrity, and inspire loyalty, while habitual apologies undermine authority and weaken influence. Internal benefits are equally profound. By reserving apologies for moments of genuine responsibility, you reinforce self-respect and confidence. You recognize that your actions and presence are valid, and that accountability is a deliberate choice, not a default reaction. This strengthens self-trust and reduces anxiety, as you no longer operate under the constant pressure of anticipating others' disapproval. Emotional regulation improves, too, because you learn to tolerate tension without reflexively diminishing yourself. Mastering rare apologies also restores the word sorry itself. When overused, it loses meaning. When used sparingly, it regains power. Others learn that your apologies carry significance, signaling reflection and responsibility rather than routine politeness. This distinction improves communication, reinforces boundaries, and enhances respect. Your words become tools of influence, not reflexive concessions, allowing you to maintain both presence and accountability. Practical mastery involves conscious evaluation of each situation. Ask yourself, did harm actually occur? Will this apology repair trust or merely reduce temporary discomfort? Am I maintaining boundaries and integrity while addressing responsibility? This reflection trains the mind to act deliberately, not reactively, gradually replacing habitual submission with empowered, strategic communication. Over time, this approach recalibrates relationships, professional dynamics, and personal self-perception. A rare, meaningful apology also strengthens leadership and relational influence. It communicates maturity, clarity, and moral integrity, signaling that you are accountable yet grounded. It fosters reciprocal responsibility, as others become aware that accountability is mutual, not one-sided. By contrast, habitual apologies perpetuate imbalance, invite external control, and dilute trust. The rare apology restores balance, models ethical behavior, and conveys confidence without aggression. Ultimately, mastering when and how to apologize transforms the word from a reflexive gesture into a tool of power, presence, and influence. It completes the journey of reclaiming authority over your words, actions, and emotional responses. Habitual apologies are replaced by intentional, precise, and sincere statements, reserved for moments that truly require accountability. In this way, apologies regain their value. Self-respect is reinforced, and interactions, personal, social, and professional, become grounded in integrity rather than fear. The rare apology demonstrates that accountability is deliberate, not coerced, and that integrity guides communication rather than reflexive submission. By integrating these principles, you achieve a balance between presence and respect, self-expression and empathy. You no longer apologize out of habit. You apologize with purpose, signaling responsibility and trustworthiness. This mastery represents the culmination of the journey, a life where sorry is neither overused nor undervalued, but wielded wisely, enhancing both internal confidence and external influence.